You don't work the graveyard shift in an ambulance for 8 years because you love the scenery. You do it because the chaos makes sense to you. Or, at least, it used to make sense to me. My partner, Miller, and I were posted at our usual spot, the 7-Eleven parking lot off exit 42, just north of Seattle. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. The rain was doing that relentless Pacific Northwest drizzle, the kind that doesn't wash anything away but just makes the world look slick and greasy. The inside of Unit 4 Alpha smelled like it always did. Stale coffee, diesel fumes, and the sharp chemical tang of antiseptic wipes. "I hate these things," Miller grumbled from the driver's seat. He was tapping a thick finger against the screen of the new heavy-duty tablet mounted to the dashboard. "Management says they optimize response times," I said, leaning my head against the cool window glass. I watched a neon sign flicker in a puddle outside, supposed to sync with traffic patterns and 911 dispatch in real time. "It's a brick," Miller spat. "And it's too bright." He wasn't wrong. The tablets were installed 3 days ago, massive rubber-encased slabs that looked military-grade but ran software that felt 10 years old. They were supposed to remain dormant until dispatch sent a call through the CAD, computer-aided dispatch system. When a call came in, the screen would flash red, a siren tone would blare inside the cab, and the GPS would lock onto the coordinates. That was the protocol. Miller reclined his seat, pulling his cap over his eyes to catch a 10-minute nap. I closed my eyes too, listening to the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the wipers. Then, the cab flooded with blue light. My eyes snapped open. The tablet hadn't made a sound, no siren tone, no crackle from the radio, just a silent, harsh illumination that cut through the darkness of the cab like a spotlight. "Did we get a tone?" Miller asked, his voice thick with sleep, squinting at the dashboard. "No," I said, sitting up straighter. "Radio is dead silent." I looked at the screen. The interface was different than the standard standby mode. A single red line was tracing a route through the city grid, moving with a fluid, organic speed that didn't look like a computer processing data. It looked like someone drawing a line with a steady hand. It stopped at an intersection about 2 miles east of us. "Destination, 4TH and Vine. 3 minutes. "Must be a glitch," Miller muttered, reaching out to reset the device. "Dispatch hasn't said a word." He pressed the power button. Nothing happened. He held it down. The screen remained frozen on the map, the red destination pin pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat. "Hey, dispatch." I keyed up the radio mic, my thumb sliding over the textured plastic. "This is Unit 4 Alpha. We're getting a location ping on the new nav system, but no audio. You guys have something for us at 4th and Vine?" The silence that followed felt heavy. Static hissed, dry and empty. "Unit 4, Alpha. This is dispatch." The voice crackled back, sounding bored. "Negative. Board is clear. No active calls in your sector. Reset your terminal." "Copy that," I said. "See?" Miller sighed, finally getting the screen to turn off by yanking the power cord from the dash. The cab plunged back into darkness. "Piece of junk. I'm telling you, these things are gonna get someone killed." He chuckled dryly at his own joke. I didn't laugh, because right before the screen went black, I saw the ETA timer count down. It hadn't said ETA to arrival. The text at the bottom, in small font I almost missed, read, "ETA, to impact." The screen didn't stay black for long. 10 seconds after Miller yanked the cord, the tablet flared to life again, running off an internal battery I didn't know it had. This time, it made a sound, a low digital warble that vibrated against the dashboard plastic. "Are you kidding me?" Miller groaned, slamming his hands on the steering wheel. The map was back. The red line was solid now. Urgent. Destination, 4TH and Vine. Status, critical. Time remaining, 1:50. "Miller," I said, a cold prickle starting at the base of my neck. "Just drive, please. It's 6 blocks. It's a ghost call, Jack. Dispatch already cleared us. Humor me." He rolled his eyes, but he put the rig in gear. We didn't run the siren, we couldn't, not without authorization, but Miller drove with a heavy foot, the V8 engine growling as we cut through the deserted streets. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the roof of the ambulance like 1,000 nervous fingers. We turned onto 4th Avenue. The streetlights reflected off the wet asphalt in long distorted streaks of orange. It was a ghost town. No cars, no pedestrians, just the rhythmic swish-swish of our wipers. See? Miller slowed the rig as we approached the intersection of Vine. Nothing. Not a damn thing. He pulled to the curb and idled. The intersection was empty. The traffic light overhead swung gently in the wind, cycling lazily from green to yellow to red. I looked at the tablet. The map had zoomed in on our location. The red pin was directly in the center of the intersection. Time remaining, 0:15. It's broken. Miller reached for his coffee cup. Write it up in the log. System malfunction sent us chasing ghosts at 2 a.m. I stared through the windshield. The silence of the street felt heavy, pressurized. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of a held breath. "Jack, relax," Miller said, noticing my grip on the door handle. "We're the only ones here." "Wait," I whispered. Time remaining, 0:03. To my left, headlights swept across the brickwork of the corner building. Fast. Too fast for this weather. 0:02. From the right, the roar of a diesel engine echoed off the alley walls. 0:01. "Miller, look." The sound hit us before the visual did. It was a sickening, wet crunch, the sound of steel folding like paper and glass turning to powder instantly. A silver sedan shot into the intersection, running the red light. At the exact same second, a delivery truck barreled through the green on Vine. They met in the center of the crosshairs. The impact lifted the sedan 2 feet off the ground. The truck plowed through the driver's side door, carrying the smaller car across the wet pavement in a shower of sparks and plastic debris. The screech of tires was deafening, a high-pitched scream that tore through the rainy night. The wreckage slid to a halt just 20 feet from our front bumper. Steam hissed from the crushed radiators, mixing with the fog. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it would crack a bone. I sat frozen, my hand still gripping the door handle, staring at the mangle of metal that hadn't existed 10 seconds ago. Miller dropped his coffee. It splashed onto the floor mat unnoticed. His mouth was open, his face pale in the dashboard lights. "How?" he stammered, his voice trembling. "How did it know?" I looked down at the tablet. The red route line was gone. In its place, a simple, benign message blinked in cheerful green text. "You have arrived. We worked the crash. That's what you do. You shove the terror into a little box in the back of your brain, lock it tight, and you grab the trauma bag." We intubated the truck driver and cut the woman out of the sedan. By the time fire and rescue took over the scene, my gloves were slick with blood and transmission fluid. Back in the rig, the silence was louder than the sirens had been. "It was a scanner delay," Miller said. He was scrubbing his hands with sanitizer, scrubbing so hard his skin was turning red. "That's all." The system picked up a 911 call from a bystander before dispatch voiced it. "There were no bystanders, Miller," I said quietly, watching the rain streak the windshield. "We were the bystanders. We were there before the glass even hit the ground." "Then it was a coincidence," he snapped, his voice cracking. "A freak luck of the draw. Don't make it into something it isn't, Jack. I need this job." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. Rationality is the only shield you have in this line of work. You see dead kids, severed limbs, overdoses. You have to believe there's a logic to the universe, cause and effect. Then, the tablet hummed again. It wasn't a loud noise, but in the quiet cab, it sounded like a gunshot. We both froze. Miller's hands stopped scrubbing. We looked at the screen. Destination, I-5 South. Mile marker 168. Event, rollover. Ada, to impact. 3 minutes. "No," Miller whispered. No. "Drive," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. "We're already on the on-ramp. Mile marker 168 is 2 miles down." Miller drove. He didn't want to, but instinct is a funny thing. We merged onto the highway. Traffic was light, just a few semi-trucks and late-night commuters. Time remaining, 1:45. "What are we looking for?" Miller gripped the wheel so tight his knuckles were white. "Jack, what the hell are we looking for?" I scanned the road ahead. "I don't know." We were cruising in the right lane. Ahead of us, a blue Ford Explorer was moving at a steady 65 miles per hour. It looked perfectly normal. Turn signal on, changing lanes responsibly. I could see the silhouette of a driver and a passenger. Just people going home. Time remaining, 0:45. "It's that one," I said, a wave of nausea hitting me. I didn't know how I knew, but I felt it, a heaviness in the air around the SUV. "They're driving fine," Miller argued, though he kept his distance. "Nothing's wrong with them." 020. "Back off, Miller. Give them room." 010. I found myself holding my breath, my eyes darting from the glowing countdown to the unsuspecting car ahead. It was a unique kind of torture watching a tragedy that hadn't happened yet. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to key the PA system and yell "pull over," but I was paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of it. 03, 02, 01. At exactly 0, the rear passenger tire of the Explorer disintegrated. It didn't just go flat, it exploded. The SUV lurched violently to the right, the rim catching the asphalt with a shower of orange sparks. The driver overcorrected. I watched in slow motion as the heavy vehicle turned sideways, caught the soft mud of the shoulder, and flipped. Crunch, smash, crunch. It rolled 3 times, a chaotic tumble of metal and glass, before coming to rest on its roof in the ditch. The wheels were still spinning in the air, hissing. The tablet dinged, a cheerful, helpful sound. "You have arrived." Miller slammed on the brakes, bringing the ambulance to a screeching halt on the shoulder. He didn't move to get out. He just stared at the wreckage, his chest heaving, his eyes wide and wet. "We watched it," he whispered. "Jack, we just watched it happen. We didn't report it. How could we? Hey dispatch, our GPS is clairvoyant. They'd have pulled our licenses and sent us for mandatory psych evaluations faster than you could blink. So we kept our mouths shut. We washed the blood off our uniforms, restocked the gauze, and waited. Over the next 4 shifts, a pattern emerged. A sickening, mathematical precision that defied every law of probability I'd ever known. It wasn't random. The tablet had rules. Rule 1. It never warned us about the mundane stuff. The grandma with the broken hip, the drunk college kid vomiting in a frat house, those calls came through the radio like normal. The tablet stayed dark for those. It only woke up for the trauma. The bones snapping, the arteries opening, the metal crunching. Rule 2. The timing was sadistic. That was the worst part. The GPS didn't just know where an accident would happen. It calculated exactly how long it would take us to get there. If we were 10 minutes away, it alerted us 10 minutes and 30 seconds before the event. If we were 2 minutes away, it gave us 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It didn't matter if we drove like maniacs or crawled at the speed limit, the ETA adjusted dynamically. It was rigged. The algorithm ensured we would always arrive exactly moments before the catastrophe occurred. Not early enough to stop it, just early enough to watch. And then there was the sound. It stopped doing the standard notification chime after that first night. Instead, it developed this noise. It wasn't a beep. It was a low-frequency digital hum, a vibration that seemed to bypass my ears and rattle directly against the fillings in my teeth. It sounded like a massive power line surging or a heavy breath drawn through a synthesizer. Thursday night, 11:42 p.m. The hum started. My stomach dropped like a stone. Miller didn't even look at the screen. He just gripped the wheel, his knuckles white as bone, and waited for my instruction. "Where?" he rasped. I looked at the glowing red line. Industrial District. The rail crossing on Pine. ETA to impact, 4:15. We drove in silence. The city blurred past, streaks of neon and rain. The dread in the cab was palpable, a physical weight pressing on my chest. We weren't paramedics anymore. We were spectators. We were a captive audience for a horror show directed by a piece of hardware. We rounded the corner to the crossing with 20 seconds on the clock. The crossing arms were down. The red lights were flashing, reflecting off the wet tracks. A freight train was thundering through, a wall of screeching steel and graffiti. "Nothing's here," Miller said, his voice hopeful. "The train's already passing. It's safe. Time remaining. 05. Wait, I said. 03. A teenager in a black hoodie emerged from the shadows on the other side of the tracks. He had large headphones on, the noise-canceling kind. He was looking at his phone, walking with the casual gait of someone in their own world. He started to duck under the crossing arm, assuming the train we saw was the only one. 01. He didn't see the express Amtrak coming on the second track, hidden behind the freight train. "Hey!" I screamed, slamming my hand against the glass. The rush of air from the second train. Hit him a split second before the engine did. It was over instantly. A pink mist. A dark shape thrown 50 feet into the darkness. The tablet hummed that low, satisfied note. You have arrived. Miller threw the ambulance into park and vomited all over the dashboard. We have to stop it, Miller said. He was wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, eyes bloodshot and wild. Next time, Jack. We don't just watch, we intervene. We cheat the damn timer. I agreed. The guilt was eating me alive. We weren't Grim Reapers. We were paramedics. Our job was to save lives, not clock in for their expiration. 2 hours later, the tablet hummed. The vibration rattled the loose change in the cup holder. Destination: 1422 Oakwood Drive. Event: fall from height. Ada to impact. 5:30. 5.5 minutes. Miller slammed the ambulance into drive, tires screeching on the wet pavement. It's a residential zone. If we burn the siren, we can get there in 3. We can beat the clock by 2 whole minutes. We tore through the suburbs. Miller drove like a madman, blowing stop signs and mounting curbs on turns. The siren wailed, waking up half the neighborhood, but we didn't care. We were on a mission. We were going to break the pattern. We screeched to a halt in front of a 2-story beige colonial with 1:15 left on the timer. Go, Miller yelled. I bailed out of the passenger door before the rig even fully stopped. The rain was torrential now, a curtain of water. I scanned the house, front yard empty, porch empty. Then I saw him. Around the side of the garage, illuminated by the ambulance headlights, a man was halfway up an extension ladder. He was middle-aged, wearing a yellow raincoat, wrestling with a gutter that had come loose in the storm. He was stable. The ladder was planted on the concrete driveway. He was holding on with one hand, hammering with the other. Time remaining, 0:45. He was fine. He wasn't falling, but the timer was ticking. Get down! I screamed, sprinting across the lawn, my boots slipping on the wet grass. Sir, get off the ladder. The man froze. He hadn't seen us pull up over the sound of the storm and his own hammering. He twisted his body violently to look down, startled by the sudden appearance of a uniformed paramedic screaming at him from the darkness. What? He yelled back, confused. Who are? In his confusion, he shifted his weight. He took his hand off the gutter to gesture at me. The ladder feet, which had been perfectly stable a moment ago, slipped on the wet concrete because of his sudden jerk. No! I reached out, but I was still 10 feet away. It happened in agonizingly slow motion. The base of the ladder kicked out. The man flailed, his eyes locking with mine. There was no accusation in them, just pure, bewildered terror. He fell backward. 20 feet. He didn't hit the grass. He hit the edge of the concrete driveway. The sound was wet and sharp, like a melon being smashed with a sledgehammer. His head bounced once, then settled at an unnatural angle. The yellow raincoat glistened under the harsh strobe of our emergency lights. I skid to a halt next to him, falling to my knees. Sir? Sir! I checked for a pulse. Nothing. His neck was broken instantly. I looked up, gasping for air, rain mixing with the sweat on my face. The ambulance sat idling in the street. Through the windshield, I could see the glow of the tablet. You have arrived. A cold, paralyzing realization washed over me, colder than the rain. He had been fine. He was fixing his gutter. If we hadn't shown up, if I hadn't screamed, if the siren hadn't distracted him, he would have finished the job and gone back inside to his warm bed. We didn't prevent the accident. We caused it. The tablet wasn't predicting the future. It was giving us instructions. We left the scene before the coroner arrived. The police took our statements. Accidental fall. We were patrolling nearby. He slipped when we called out. Standard procedure. But the officer looked at us strangely. Maybe he saw the guilt radiating off us like heat waves. Or maybe he noticed that Miller's hands were shaking so bad he couldn't hold his pen. Back in the rig, the atmosphere was suffocating. The smell of wet wool and rubbing alcohol felt thicker than usual, heavy in my lungs. Miller refused to look at the dashboard. He had actually taken a roll of medical tape from the supply cabinet and plastered a thick white X over the tablet screen, blocking the map. I'm not looking at it, he whispered, staring dead ahead at the wet asphalt of Highway 99. I'm not playing its game, Jack. If I don't see it, it doesn't happen. It's still on. Miller, I said softly. Under the tape, I could see the faint red glow bleeding through the adhesive fabric. I don't care. We drove in silence for 20 minutes. The rain had slowed to a mist. I was just about to suggest we head back to the station, claim mechanical failure, and go home when the speakers crackled. Usually, the GPS voice was a standard robotic female, clear, crisp, slightly synthesized. Turn right in 200 feet. You know the voice. But when the speakers popped this time, the sound that came out made my blood turn to ice water. In 500. The audio cut out, replaced by a wet, gurgling static. It sounded like someone trying to clear a throat full of fluid. Miller flinched so hard, the ambulance swerved into the left lane. What the hell was that? Rerouting. The voice came back. It wasn't a robot anymore. It was raspy, breathless. Every syllable sounded like it was being dragged over broken glass. It had the distinct, terrifying quality of a human voice speaking through a crushed windpipe. Make a U-turn. Gurgle. Hiss. When possible. Turn it off, Miller screamed, taking his hands off the wheel to claw at the volume knob. He spun it all the way to the left. The volume didn't drop. It got louder. Destination. On the right. The voice cracked on the last word, ending in a high-pitched wheeze that sounded eerily like a final breath. I stared at the taped-over screen. The glow behind the tape was pulsing in time with the raspy voice, like a visualizer. It sounds like them, I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. Miller. It sounds like the victims. Shut up, Miller roared. Shut up, Jack. That wheeze. That was the guy on the tracks. The wet sound? That was the man on the ladder. I said, shut up! Miller slammed on the brakes, pulling onto the gravel shoulder of a dark service road. He was breathing hard, hyperventilating. The cab was silent again, save for the hum of the engine, and the faint, rhythmic thrum, 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 coming from the tablet. It wasn't just processing data anymore. It was learning. It was absorbing the sounds of the dying and playing them back to us as directions. And then, soft as a whisper, the speakers crackled one last time. You missed the turn. Miller didn't want to drive. I had to threaten to report him for abandonment of duty, just to get him to put the rig back in gear. But even then, he wouldn't touch the navigation screen. He left the tape over it, driving blindly into the darkness while I navigated from the passenger seat, peeling back the corner of the adhesive just enough to see the coordinates. It wasn't an address this time. No street name, no house number. Just raw latitude and longitude. 47.4921 degrees north. 121.784. 4 degrees west. ETA to impact. 8. Where does that put us? Miller asked, his voice dead. He was driving on autopilot now, a shell of a man. Deep, I said, checking my phone to cross-reference. It's way past the suburbs, into the foothills, logging territory. We turned off the paved road onto a gravel track that wound through the dense pine forest. The ambulance suspension groaned and creaked, fighting against ruts deep enough to swallow a tire. The trees here were old and thick, crowding the narrow path, their branches scraping against the box of the ambulance like skeletal fingers trying to pry us open. There's no one out here, Jack, Miller muttered. It's 3 a.m. It's a glitch. Just keep going. The road ended in a muddy cul-de-sac used for turning logging trucks around. It should have been empty. It wasn't. In the center of the clearing, illuminated by our high beams, sat a rusted 2008 gray Honda Civic. The engine was running. I could see the white plume of exhaust rising into the cold night air, but it wasn't drifting away. A thick, translucent plastic hose was duct taped to the tailpipe. It snaked up the trunk, over the roof, and disappeared into the rear passenger window, which was sealed shut with layers of packing tape. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a crash. Time remaining, 0:45. Oh God, Miller breathed. He saw it too. I didn't wait for the rig to stop completely. I threw the door open and sprinted across the mud. The air smelled of wet pine and the sickly sweet stench of carbon monoxide. Hey, I screamed, slapping the driver's side glass. Unlock the door, can you hear me? Inside, the cabin was filled with a thick gray fog. I could barely make out the silhouette in the driver's seat. A woman. Her head was tipped back against the headrest, eyes closed, looking peaceful in a terrible, unnatural way. 020. I tried the handle. Locked. Of course. Miller, Halligan Bar, now! I roared, grabbing a heavy flashlight from my belt. I didn't wait for Miller. I swung the flashlight with everything I had. The safety glass shattered into thousands of diamonds. A cloud of exhaust poured out of the broken window, stinging my eyes and throat. I reached in, unlocked the door, and ripped it open. I grabbed the woman by her coat and dragged her out onto the muddy ground. She was limp, heavy. Her skin had that telltale cherry red flush of CO poisoning. Come on, I grunted, checking for a pulse. It was there. Faint. Thread fluttering like a dying moth's wing against my fingertips. 05. She's alive! I yelled to Miller, who was standing by the ambulance, holding the pry bar, staring at the woods. Get the oxygen! Miller! I started rescue breathing. 1 breath. 2. 03. I felt her chest rise. I felt her heart flutter one last time under my hand. 1. And then it stopped. It didn't taper off. It just ceased. Like a switch had been flipped. 1 second she was a person, the next she was an object. I froze, my fingers still pressed to her carotid artery. The silence of the forest rushed back in, deafening and absolute. From the open door of the ambulance, 50 feet away, the tablet let out a single, piercing tone. You have arrived. I sat back in the mud, staring at the woman's face. The GPS hadn't sent us here to save her. It knew the traffic, the road conditions, and the exact concentration of carbon monoxide in that car. It calculated the precise moment her physiology would fail. It didn't send us to be paramedics. It sent us to be witnesses. We left the body with the sheriff's deputy, who finally showed up 20 minutes later. We didn't exchange words. Miller walked back to the ambulance like a zombie, his boots dragging in the mud, staring at nothing. He didn't put his seatbelt on. He didn't check his mirrors. He just drove. The silence in the cab was volatile. It felt like the air pressure before a tornado touches down, charged, heavy, and tasting of copper. I watched Miller out of the corner of my eye. His jaw was clenched so hard I could see the muscles spasming near his ear. He was gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2, squeezing until the leather creaked. We were back on the main road, passing under the flickering yellow streetlights of the suburbs, when the hum started again. It was louder this time. Aggressive. A vibrating, grinding noise that resonated in the hollow space of the dashboard. Miller didn't flinch. He didn't look. I peeled back the tape. My fingers were shaking. Destination: St. Mary's Elementary. School zone: ETA to impact. 2. Miller, I whispered, my voice dry. It's the elementary school. It's 3 in the morning, Miller said through gritted teeth. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. School's closed. Kids are in bed. Miller, the timer says 2 minutes. There are no kids. Miller slammed his fist against the steering wheel, the sudden violence shaking the whole cab. I'm not doing it, Jack. I'm not watching a kid die. He didn't hit the brakes. Instead, he reached down between the seats and grabbed the heavy brass oxygen wrench we kept for stubborn tanks. Miller, stop. You're driving. I'm killing it, he snarled. He swung the wrench. Crack! He smashed the heavy brass tool directly into the face of the tablet. The safety glass shattered instantly, spiderwebbing outward from the impact point. Shards of glass sprayed onto the gear shift and my lap. Die! He screamed, swinging again. Crack! The plastic casing cracked. The mounting bracket bent. He was destroying the hardware, pulverizing the LCD screen into dust. He swung a third time, panting, sweat flying from his forehead, until the screen was nothing but a concave crater of jagged glass and twisted metal. There, he panted, dropping the wrench. It clattered onto the floor mat. It's done. It's off. I looked at the dashboard. It wasn't off. The backlight hadn't flickered. Even through the ruined, pulverized display, the light was shining through. But it wasn't the clean blue-white of an LED anymore. It was a deep, throbbing crimson. The liquid crystals inside the screen were leaking, oozing out of the cracks like black blood. But the image was still projecting. It was projecting onto the cracks. The spider web of broken glass had formed a new map. and in the center of the shattered mess, a bright red light pulsed. Thump thump, thump thump. It looked biological, like an organ beating inside a ribcage of broken glass. "Miller," I said, pressing my back against the passenger door, away from the device. "Look." He looked. His eyes widened, reflecting the red gore of the screen. From the ruined speakers, distorted by the damage, the voice gargled out, recalculating. Route. Straight. Ahead. Miller let out a sound I'd never heard a grown man make, a high, whimpering sob. He didn't steer. He let the ambulance drift. We were coming up on the school zone, and straight ahead, in the middle of the empty road, something was moving. The shape in the road wasn't a person. It was a dark blue Toyota Camry, or what was left of one. It had wrapped itself around the reinforced concrete base of the school zone flashing light post. The impact was so severe, the engine block had been pushed into the passenger seat. Steam hissed violently into the cold air, screaming like a tea kettle left on a stove too long. Miller slammed the brakes. The ambulance fishtailed on the wet leaves before coming to a halt just inches from the wreckage. "I didn't see it happen," Miller whispered, staring at the smoking metal. "Jack, I didn't see it happen. It was just suddenly there." I didn't answer. I grabbed the trauma kit and jumped out. The air smelled of antifreeze and ozone, that sharp, electric smell of a thunderstorm. I ran to the driver's side. The door was crushed shut, the window gone. Inside, a young man, maybe 25, was pinned between the steering column and the seat. His chest was a mess, a concave ruin of ribs and fabric, but he was awake. His eyes found mine immediately. They weren't glazed over with shock, they were clear, terrifyingly clear. "Sir," I said, going into autopilot, reaching through the window frame to stabilize his neck. "My name is Jack. I'm a paramedic. Don't move. We're gonna get you out." He didn't scream. He didn't ask for help. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a wet, bubbling cough. Blood sprayed onto my gloves. "You're here," he rasped. "We're here," I confirmed, checking his vitals. His pulse was thready, racing against the inevitable. "Hold on, buddy." "No," he wheezed, shaking his head slightly against my grip. "You don't get it. It said you were coming." I froze. "What?" He lifted a trembling, blood-soaked hand and pointed toward his own dashboard. There, mounted to the air vent, was his smartphone. The screen was cracked, but still illuminated. It was running a navigation app I didn't recognize. The map was dark mode, black and gray, except for one bright icon, an ambulance icon. It was positioned right next to his location pin. "It told me," the man whispered, his eyes drifting to the smashed screen of his phone. "It told me to turn left, into the pole." It said, "Emergency response ready, impact recommended." My blood ran cold. I looked back at his phone. The text on the screen didn't say, "You have arrived." It read, "Coordination complete." "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you turn?" He looked at me with a profound, childlike confusion. I just followed the line." "You just follow the line." His eyes rolled back. The tension left his body all at once. The hand pointing at the phone dropped, smearing a streak of crimson across the dashboard plastic. I stood there for a long moment, the rain soaking through my uniform. I looked at his phone, then back at our ambulance. Miller was standing by the open back doors of the rig, staring at me. He had heard. "It's not predicting them," Miller said, his voice flat, devoid of hope. "It's setting them up. It's a dispatch system, Jack. But it's dispatching the victims to us." I looked back at the dead man's phone. As I watched, the screen flickered. The map zoomed out. The ambulance icon began to move. It wasn't moving away. It was moving toward a new address. And then, a notification popped up on the dead man's screen, clear as day. "Next target acquired." We got back in the rig. We didn't talk. We didn't call it in. What was the point? The police would find him eventually. The morning commuters would find him. We were just pawns. Miller sat in the driver's seat, staring at his hands. They were shaking so violently they looked blurry. "Where to next?" he asked. He didn't sound like Miller anymore. He sounded like the GPS voice hollow, resigned. I looked at the shattered dashboard tablet. The red light was pulsing faster now. Thump, 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 thump. The liquid crystal blood had pooled at the bottom of the screen, forming abstract shapes that looked too much like Rorschach tests of skulls. Then, the voice came back. It wasn't raspy this time. It wasn't the dead man on the tracks or the woman in the woods. It was my voice. Turn. Right. Onto Sycamore Avenue. My stomach dropped into my boots. Sycamore Avenue. That wasn't a random street. That was my street. What did it say? Miller asked, his head snapping up. It's my voice, I whispered. Miller. Ugh, that's my voice. The tablet hummed, vibrating the broken glass. Destination: 402 Sycamore Ave. Event: structural failure. Ida to impact. 402 Sycamore. My apartment building. A shitty brick walk-up I'd lived in for 3 years. My wife. I choked out. Sarah is home. She's off on Tuesdays. Miller didn't hesitate. He slammed the ambulance into drive and floored it. The tires squealed, burning rubber on the wet asphalt. 12 minutes! He yelled over the roar of the engine. We're 15 minutes out, Jack. Call her. I was already fumbling for my phone. My fingers were slick with sweat and blood. I dialed Sarah. Ring. 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 Come on. Come on. Pick up. Hi, you've reached Sarah. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and... Sarah! I screamed into the voicemail. Get out of the apartment! Get out now! Don't ask questions. Just run. Go to the street. I hung up and dialed again. Ring. Ring. ETA to impact. 10:30. We were flying. Miller was blowing through red lights at 60 miles an hour. The siren was wailing, a banshee scream cutting through the night. Why isn't she answering? I yelled, slamming my fist against the dash. Maybe she's asleep, Miller shouted back, swerving around a delivery truck. Maybe her phone is on silent. The tablet pulsed again. The map on the shattered screen zoomed in. The red line ended right at my front door. Event update. Catastrophic gas explosion. My blood turned to ice. Gas explosion? We don't have gas. The building is electric. The main line, Miller yelled. The city main runs under the street. If that goes, if that went, the whole block went. ETA to impact, 8. Faster, Miller, drive faster. I dialed again and again. Nothing. Just her cheerful voicemail, mocking me. 5. We turned onto the main drag, leading to my neighborhood. We were close. I could see the familiar skyline of the apartment complex in the distance. 3. We're going to make it, Miller said, his knuckles white. We're gonna beat it this time, Jack. We're gonna get her out. 1. We screeched around the final corner. My building came into view. It was fine. The streetlights were on. The brick facade was intact. There was no fire, no smoke. It's okay, I yelled, unbuckling my seatbelt before we even stopped. It's still standing. Miller slammed on the brakes in front of the hydrant. I leaped out, sprinting toward the front door. Sarah! I screamed, fumbling for my keys. I burst into the lobby. I ran up the 3 flights of stairs, taking them 2 at a time. My lungs burned. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached my door. Number 402. I unlocked it and threw it open. Sarah! The apartment was dark, quiet. The smell of lavender detergent and stale coffee greeted me. Jack? A sleepy voice came from the bedroom. She walked into the hallway, rubbing her eyes, wearing her oversized t-shirt. She looked confused, scared by my shouting. Jack, what's wrong? Why are you home? She was safe. There was no gas leak, no fire. I collapsed against the doorframe, gasping for air, tears streaming down my face. Oh God. Oh, thank God. I grabbed her, hugging her so tight she squeaked. You're okay. You're okay. Jack, you're scaring me, she said, pulling back. You're shaking. What happened? I looked at my watch. The 12 minutes were up. It lied, I whispered, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. The damn machine lied. It was a decoy. Then, from outside the window, down on the street, I heard it. Not an explosion, not a crash. I heard the distinct, heavy crunch of metal hitting flesh. Then the squeal of tires. Then, silence. I ran to the window and looked down. The ambulance was there, idling where we left it, but the driver's side door was open. Miller wasn't in the seat. He was lying in the middle of the road, 20 feet in front of the bumper. His body was twisted, broken, and standing over him, bathed in the flashing red lights of our own rig, was a dark figure holding a tire iron. The figure looked up at my window. Even from 3 stories up, I saw the face. It was the man from the tracks, the teenager in the hoodie, but he was dead. We saw him die. The figure raised the tire iron and pointed it at me. Down in the cab of the ambulance, the shattered tablet flared bright red, illuminating the empty driver's seat. It hadn't predicted a gas explosion. It just needed to get me out of the rig. It needed to get Miller alone. "Lock the door!" I screamed at Sarah, pushing her back into the apartment. "Lock it and call 911. I didn't wait for an answer. I spun around and flew back down the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. My hands sliding down the banister so fast, the friction burned my palm. By the time I burst out the front door and onto the rain-slicked sidewalk, the street was empty. The dark figure, the dead kid from the tracks, was gone. There was no one holding a tire iron. There were no witnesses. Just the low, guttural idle of the ambulance diesel engine and the rotating red lights washing over the wet pavement. And Miller. He was lying face up in the center of the road. His eyes were wide open, staring at the rainy sky, but they were fixed, glassy. The side of his head was caved in, a brutal, depressed fracture that no EMT could fix. "Miller!" I slid on my knees next to him, the asphalt tearing through my uniform pants. "Miller, stay with me!" I checked for a pulse, but I knew. I knew the second I touched his cold skin. He was gone. I looked around frantically for the attacker. "Who's there? Show yourself!" Silence, just the rain. Then, the radio in the ambulance cab crackled. It wasn't the static hiss of an open channel. It was a clear, crisp audio file playing. 12 minutes! We're 15 minutes out, Jack. Call her. It was Miller's voice, recorded from 10 minutes ago. Then my voice followed, playing back from the speakers. "Faster, Miller! Drive faster!" I stood up, backing away from the body, staring at the open driver's side door. The shattered tablet on the dashboard was glowing so bright it hurt to look at. The radio clicked again. "We're gonna make it. We're gonna beat it this time, Jack." Then, a new sound. The sound of Miller's skull cracking. Recorded. Amplified. Played on a loop. Crunch. 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 I realized then, with a nausea that nearly brought me to my knees, that there was no attacker. There was no ghost of the kid from the tracks. I had hallucinated the figure from the window, a projection of my own guilt and terror. Miller hadn't been murdered by a ghost. I looked at the ambulance door. The heavy steel edge was bloody. Miller had bailed out to check the tire or the engine. Or maybe he tried to run. The door had swung back, maybe the wind, maybe the incline, maybe the thing controlling the truck had hit him. Or he had slipped. It didn't matter how he died. What mattered was why. The tablet buzzed. The red light pulsed. Event complete. Destination reached. The destination wasn't my apartment. It wasn't the gas explosion. The gas explosion was just the bait. It was the carrot on the stick to make us drive like maniacs, to spike our adrenaline, to separate us, to get Miller out of the driver's seat. I walked toward the open door, drawn like a moth to a flame. I looked at the screen. The text changed. Driver's seat vacant. Operator required. The realization hit me. The GPS didn't just predict accidents. It needed them. It fed on the panic, the speed, the trauma, and we had just fed it the ultimate meal, one of our own. I reached in to grab the keys, to kill the engine, to end this nightmare, but my hand didn't go for the ignition. My hand, trembling and cold, reached out and touched the shattered screen. I didn't want to. I was screaming internally to stop. But my body wasn't mine anymore. It was part of the circuit. The glass shards cut my fingertips. My blood smeared onto the display, mixing with the black liquid crystal. The tablet hummed a sound of pure digital ecstasy. Biometric accepted, new route calculating.